Welcome, new Templars. I'm 𝕯𝖊𝖚𝖚, aka 𝕯𝖚𝖚𝖚, the map maker. And we've also got a new map behind us tonight, the seed oil map, which I'll talk about a little bit later. This is going to be a current event update video, recording this August 7th. A lot has happened this week, a lot of different stories. Some of them can be a little bit confusing between each other. We got good news and we got bad news. So we got a lot to cover in this video, including what I'm calling the gerrymandering wars, which are really focused on Texas right now, but which I think President Trump wants to see happen across the whole country, which means redrawing of congressional districts. The Russia boomerang, justice coming for those who tried to get Trump impeached over the Russia hoax way back in 2017. The insane asylum revival and moving homeless off the streets, which is an executive order from Trump that we'll discuss. And possibly the biggest good news of the night, just today was announced that the lawsuit between XRP and the SEC has now officially concluded. So we could very shortly be seeing XRP reaching another new all-time high, possibly well beyond its previous all-time high. So it's very exciting news for XRP holders and for Jazzfest enthusiasts. Now, I've separated this news into the good news and the bad news tonight. That was the good news. Now, the bad news includes a congressman running to Israel to kiss Benjamin Netanyahu's ass right after Congress has gone into recess for the summer. And then some bad news from DC involving big balls being beat up. And I have some theories about this, which connects to the event in Cincinnati that I made a video about last week. And there's also been multiple interviews now with the woman from Cincinnati who was beaten by a mob in downtown Cincinnati. And I've done a little bit of analysis on those interviews of her that I want to discuss. And I'll get to that when I get to that. Don't want to give it away too soon. But so obviously there's a lot going on, even a little bit more than that from what I just listed there. But let's just dive right into it. I want to try to make these videos a little bit shorter. They've been getting too long lately, I think, and I want to keep your attention here. And so let's start talking about this. First off is the gerrymandering situation. And now I knew, we have congressional districts. I even talked about in my video last week how Cincinnati, my city, has been essentially taken over by DEI, and that I thought that might be due to the drawing of these districts, which I'd heard this term gerrymandering before, but I was not necessarily aware of the definition until recently. But just so everyone knows, what we're talking about with these gerrymandering wars is gerrymandering is to manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. Achieve a result by manipulating the boundaries of an electoral constituency. So essentially redrawing the district lines. When you see a map like this of Texas, the way they've drawn all these lines may seem somewhat arbitrary. It's obviously not just a grid, but who gets to decide, how these lines are drawn and what is the effect that they have. And so, historically, different political groups have drawn these lines in order to maintain power over certain regions, possibly putting one group in power that wouldn't necessarily be in power if you had just drawn a circle around a city or a district, or, taken it by the lines of a river, which is what defines a lot of different states or bodies of water. It's like, how do we come up with these lines? And there seems to be a lot of national focus right now on Texas, because Texas Democrats have fled the state once again, very similar to how they did in 2021. And in an effort to block the voting on a redrawing of these district lines, which from what I have heard would most likely cost Jasmine Crockett, the star woke Texas congresswoman, very sassy Black woman, her congressional seat there, and possibly give more seats to Republicans. So the Democrats in Texas, which is, of course, a lot of the black um, state Congress people there, have fled to Illinois, where Governor J.B. Pritzker has expressed sympathy for their plight. And just to read a little bit of an article here from Politico, dozens of Texas Democrats plan to flee the state amid a special session Sunday afternoon, last Sunday, making a last-ditch effort to disrupt a mid-decade redistricting attempt forced by President Donald Trump, according to two people briefed on the matter. It marks their second act of breaking quorum when the state house will lack the minimum number of lawmakers needed to conduct business since 2021, and it comes as the party scrambles to counter the aggressive action of Texas intended to keep Republicans in power in Congress next year by creating 5 GOP-friendly seats in the state. So the way a lot of these articles are phrased, coming from mostly left-leaning media outlets, is obviously acting like the GOP doing this is like the first time it's been invented. Well, you know what? This has been going on for a really long time. And, you know, most likely the way these districts are drawn currently are corrupt, you know, considering that, you know, this Trump operation has, the White Hat operation as well, has only really been active since 2016 on a national scale and, you know, making progress. It's been the deep state in charge ever since. And so I'd say we can assume that in every state, these lines have been drawn in ways to, you know, put bad actors in power. And so I'm all for the redrawing of these district lines. And, you know, it's something to just be aware of, that this has been going on. You know, gerrymandering is not a new idea. And I would actually characterize this, what's been going on in this current phase of it, as de-gerrymandering, or, you know, de-corrupting a lot of these states, because some of these districts you see, it'll be like a clump here, a thin little narrow line, and then another clump over there. Like, it makes no sense. And, you know, I haven't necessarily, I saw one thing comparing the old lines to what they want the new lines to be. You know, it's not necessarily clear who's in the right here or not, but, you know, if we're trying to get more Republicans in, with the way the Democrat Party is at this time, I would say it's probably a good thing. You know, we're expecting the Democrat Party to essentially be dissolved in the near future with how poorly their policies have been performing lately and the general sentiment in the public. So I'm all about this. I think this needs to happen in a lot of other places. And from what these articles are saying, that, you know, Trump is leading a national effort on this. And so while Texas is making the moves, or making the news because their Democrats are literally fleeing the state to try to prevent this from happening, I think this may need to happen in a lot of other places in order to get the right representatives of the people in positions of power, and not have DEI and, you know, intentionally, let's say, for example, in Cincinnati, like excluding white neighborhoods from the city of Cincinnati and including all these black neighborhoods, you know, not giving the people who are contributing the most in terms of taxes and, you know, contributions, the fair representation in these cities and in Congress and the federal level. So I'm all about this. And it's funny, you know, this came up in the news after I was talking about this in my video last week, looking at the way the Cincinnati districts are drawn for just even the city, for like the mayor election. Defining the lines of the city can define, you know, who is on city council, or what kind of mayor we have, what kind of police chief we have, and what kind of judges we have. And so it makes a really big impact on the success or failure of a city. And it looks like Trump is aware of this and he's trying to correct things. So moving on now to, we don't have an image for this one. A lot of these articles, there was very scant on interesting images, because a lot of these stories are sort of more preliminary or preparatory actions that are happening. But a big one involving what we all want to see in terms of mass arrests of deep state players and previous administrations who were corrupt is Attorney General Pam Bondi has ordered prosecutors to start a grand jury probe into Obama officials over the Russia investigation. And so we heard about 2 weeks ago that Tulsi Gabbard had, you know, discovered essentially a proof, you know, physical documentation that the previous administration from Obama had conspired to create this Russia conspiracy, fabricate evidence to derail his presidency or possibly prevent him from becoming president, or possibly try to get him impeached once he was president, which is beyond the scope of presidential immunity. That's not in the scope of presidential powers. And so this is definitely something that could lead to an arrest of Obama and several other high-level officials from his administration. We all know their names by this point, and many of us believe they've already been arrested, but this is a way that this could come to the public. And so articles about this were saying that a grand jury would be able to issue subpoenas as part of a criminal investigation into renewed allegations that Democrat officials tried to smear Donald Trump during his 2016 campaign by falsely alleging that his campaign was colluding with the Russian government. It could also consider an indictment should the Justice Department decide to pursue a criminal case. So, at what stage are we in this process? How close are we? A lot of podcasts have been wondering, like, is the Obama arrest coming this summer? And so, or, since all these things happened way back in 2017, is this ever going to happen? Is just this going to tarnish his public appearance a little bit? And of course, he'll walk scot-free like all these deep staters usually do. Well, at least we're moving forward a little bit. Sometimes these wheels of justice turn so slowly that it seems like justice will never come before, just old age kills these people. But I'm pretty hopeful that we'll see some public disclosure of like an Obama arrest and other, his FBI, CIA directors, and especially Hillary Clinton. This could be coming. And so, while some people say Pam Bondi dropped the ball on Epstein and those lists that people expected her to release publicly, I just believe that Pam Bondi is that there's a greater plan here. That they're doing these things in a certain order. In the Epstein case, is to drive up the public discussion, create a demand for these things to be released, so that we don't have necessarily riots and like huge levels of protests when these popular Democratic figures go down. And in this case, I think that they're really dotting all their I's and crossing their T's in order to not have Trump look like they're going to call him Hitler either way, right? But to have him not look like some kind of dictator arresting his predecessor, which is exactly what they did to him, and no one complained on the Democrat side. But this one might be the real deal, the real serious indictment that actually gets prosecuted. And so, at least we're seeing steps in a forward direction. I do have to say this could just be politics. This could just be virtue signaling, I guess, from Pam Bondi and this Justice Department. But I'm hopeful. I retain hope, and at least things are moving forward. Now, at the same time, these are the two stories that get a little bit confusing because they sound similar. But at the same time, as this grand jury coming together, which may either issue subpoenas or issue indictments, the House Oversight Committee is also issuing subpoenas to Obama-era officials, but theirs is regarding the Epstein case, and they want these Obama-era officials to come testify regarding Epstein. Now, so we are talking Hillary Clinton, and I'm not sure the whole list of others. I'm less excited about that because House Oversight Committees are generally toothless. House Oversight Committees do not have the authority to issue indictments. I'm just tired of the Epstein story in general. I think that an indictment about fabricating evidence to destroy, an incoming president is more serious than, the Epstein case is serious, but they're not even really telling the public about the most serious elements of it. But, we could see some disclosures and some reputation smearing and could the Epstein list come out of that investigation somehow publicly? We'll see. So we have multiple angles of attack on these deep staters, these Obama era Democrats. And, depending how bad it goes for them, either of these different angles of attack could lead to, the dissolution of that entire party, because, so much of it was based on the Obamas and the Bidens and the Clintons, like these parties have turned into dynasties essentially. And, while there are a few new contenders rising in the ranks, such as Gavin Newsom and AOC, these players, I would say, are not quite as serious or as formidable as, the main line of these dynasty figures, such as, descendants of Hillary Clinton and Biden, and, vice presidents from these actual administrations, people that were actually connected to these administrations, Susan Rice. And so it's really, I hate to use the expression, the walls are closing in, but we've been saying that since 2016. I won't even say that, delete that comment, but it seems like something may happen in the near future. Now, this is a big one. The executive order that Trump passed July 24th, titled Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets. This is a big one for safety in cities, big and small cities. Homelessness, poverty, and drug use and mental problems has been a big issue across the board in the United States. And essentially what this order is saying is that, it's requesting local officials, police, and health officials as well to really crack down on this, that we're not just going to allow our cities to become overrun by homeless people, homeless encampments, which thankfully is not a problem where I live, but, in places like LA and Seattle and Washington, maybe Portland, Oregon, these tent cities that these homeless people have built that are, completely illegal, but the official city position is just to essentially turn a blind eye. They've even had programs where they give these people needles and drugs so that the problem is only continuing and getting worse and getting bigger, especially with the economy the way it is, and the fentanyl epidemic the way it is. The current strategy has clearly failed. And so this executive order really lays out a master plan, at least from a high level, not necessarily specific details, about this administration getting serious about ending this homelessness epidemic, as well as the fentanyl epidemic in America. So I have a few quotes from the actual executive order, which I read like about 3/4 of it myself. And essentially, well, some articles have described this in different ways. Obviously, you see the title of the executive order is Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets. Articles have described this as Trump brings back insane asylums with executive order. This could crush the homelessness epidemic. Now, I somewhat question the veracity of a statement like that because I did not see anything in this executive order about necessarily rebuilding insane asylums. As you may know, if you follow haunted stories or like haunted explorer podcasts or TV shows, we used to have these huge psychiatric hospitals with, multiple buildings, huge wards, different wings that, they did lobotomies, they did MK Ultra experiments, they did electroshock therapy, they had rooms and space for tens of thousands of inmates potentially. I have not read an executive order that they're essentially going to build those back. I'm not sure where they're saying these people will actually go, like maybe in current hospital facilities or rehab clinics. But it's a start at least. And I think this may get the ball rolling. And I actually have a personal story that I have witnessed since this order was issued, a disappearance of a certain homeless people in an area where we have my Deep State Mapping Project warehouse. And so we'll get to a little bit of that story after I read through some of these quotes from the article or from the executive order and some articles. But some quotes from the actual executive order saying, endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. My administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. And now I have a couple other quotes from an MSN article. Pearson, who is an official involved in this, admitted that the institutions which once housed mentally unwell people were by no means perfect, but just because they were not perfect does not mean that they were unnecessary. So that's talking about, should these type of people be institutionalized or not? And in the past, certain techniques that they were using, such as those ones I mentioned, lobotomy, electroshock, weren't necessarily working. They weren't the best suited, the most modern. I mean, at the time they were modern, but nowadays some of these treatments that we used to use for mental health problems are considered pretty barbaric. And perhaps we have much better solutions, or maybe even much better solutions are going to be coming with RFK Jr. Possibly overseeing aspects of this project. I would be hopeful for that. He continued that somewhere we must find a middle ground between incarceration and untreated, unsupervised, at-risk mentally ill people. This executive order actually talks about that, such a high percentage of these homeless people on our streets, like 3/4 of them have drug addictions, hard drugs like fentanyl, cocaine, crack, and, another good portion of them have diagnosed mental illness. And so it's not just, a lack of luck in life that necessarily got a lot of these people there. Sometimes it can be that, but usually then it's more of a temporary situation. But a lot of these people are, essentially permanently somewhat disabled or, just addicted. And, they need long-term treatment. That's not necessarily something that they would be voluntarily consent to. Trump seems to acknowledge that we made a multi-generational mistake by closing down mental institutions. Perhaps reopening them will finally help to restore American cities that were once the envy of the world. So to get to my personal story about this, which actually connects to my video about Cincinnati last week, and I mentioned there's been illegal activity happening in the neighborhood where I have my warehouse. So I because of this illegal activity, let's see, how can I describe this? So there has been essentially, my warehouse is in like an old a warehouse building with multiple units, multiple tenants. Next door to that is a mini storage building that has had an illegal mini storage unit nightclub happening really since last year. I'm not sure when it began, but I started noticing it getting really bad this year in 2025. That, the whole like 2-block radius was filled up with, it was essentially a street takeover, like you've heard, just filled up with cars, people sitting in cars, playing music, going in and out of this storage unit next door. And the police had been notified of it for 6 months. They barely did anything, but they recently raided it. And so I have been going to this area, and this was like an after hours illegal storage unit club, all black, mind you, black individuals. And so since the police have raided it, I have been avoiding the area at the times that it was going, which was essentially originally from 2 a.m. Till daylight. And since the police raided it, I have been checking periodically to see if it's still going or not, to know if it's safe for me to be there. I'm not always there that time of night, but sometimes, I go to the warehouse, we watch movies. I've had parties before as well, not scary parties like these ones, but sometimes they go that late, and so it's good to know if it's a safe area to be in at night or not. And I had noticed that this party was still going since the big police raid that I saw. And but most recently, literally after this executive order was passed on July 24th, I went down there last weekend on a Saturday night at about 3:30 a.m. and it was completely dead. Like this illegal nightclub seemed to be completely gone. LED lights that were up in the window were gone. So have the police finally done their job and like gotten rid of this, arrested whoever was owning that unit, possibly put charges on the person who was the manager of the building. I've heard the owner of the building is out of state. But anyway, so the police apparently had done their job there. And I hadn't even really processed like this executive order yet. I just read it today. But then I turned around, down the street to go up to the freeway, and this street that goes to the freeway, let's call it Coleraine, there's always a lot of homeless people on that street. And, whether it's 12 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., like they're there, they don't have anywhere to go. And so it's really like up by the gas station, like near the freeway is where they're usually concentrated. And so I'm driving up this street, and the first thing I notice is there's these brand new speed bumps in the street, which, that's very different. It's like these giant speed bumps up this street, which essentially like kind of like mixed residential commercial, but very kind of slummy. And as I'm getting towards the gas station, which is where all the homeless people are always hanging out, like they're all completely gone. Like there's no one on the street. Homeless people, draped over like curbs, like doing drugs or whatever. There's no one there. And so I don't know how fast this executive order was like implemented or not. But it seems like at least the area I was in, like the homeless people got cleaned up like within like 3 or 4 days of this executive order being passed. And now you got to wonder, like, where these people go? Like, are they okay? Are they being treated right or wrong? Or are they just being fed to reptilians, which is what I assumed that Gavin Newsom did to the homeless when he cleaned up San Francisco for the Chinese president or whatever to come to San Francisco? I don't know, but something maybe we could look into and do a little more investigation. But it's definitely an issue that needed to be addressed, and I'm glad it's being addressed. And I think we need to have a little bit of oversight to make sure that these mental institutions do not become like MK Ultra hellholes or like reptilian feeding pits, that these people are treated like humans, even though at the point of addiction some of these people are at, like the barely the human even still there. But either way, it seems like this executive order passed, and I was fairly shocked to actually see real world ramifications of it, like in my warehouse's neighborhood. Thankfully, I don't live in a neighborhood like the one I just described. But I put my warehouse where it is because I thought it was mainly like an industrial, businessy district. A little bit rough around the edges. And since I moved it down there, I've realized it's more than a little rough around the edges. So, anyways, one other thing here. Oh, this is actually a post about the one I already mentioned about the Oversight Committee issuing subpoenas related to Epstein. And so there's a list of some of the individuals that the House Oversight Committee is going to be hopefully interviewing under oath about Epstein. And this is the big one that we have been waiting for since 2021 or late 2020. Ripple and the SEC agreed to dismiss appeals, officially ending the XRP lawsuit. There has been so many like false starts to this that I'm even kind of still in shock if this is really like the end of the end of the end of the end. We even had Brad Garlinghouse announcing the end, I think it was like 1 or 2 months ago, which was obviously very positive. And I still have not read exactly what the final fee or penalty was for Ripple, what they were supposed to pay the SEC and all of this. But either way, this lawsuit ending, regulatory clarity being achieved, Ripple and XRP being cleared of any legal issues related to the SEC is going to be huge for the future of Ripple and XRP. And I believe that we can expect to see a new all-time high, major price action. I think even right now, the news is still kind of settling in. We're seeing the price of XRP reapproaching its previous all-time high in the $3 range. And so, possibly by next week, maybe we could see, a new all-time high, beyond the $3 range. We could see $5, maybe 10 if we're really lucky. But long term, I'm holding till 5, 8, 9 is the amount that I bought for the amount that I want to change the world as dramatically as I want to see it changed. And so very good news about XRP here. And these were some of like the tweets announcing this. Just in, a joint dismissal of appeals has been filed by the SEC and Ripple, officially bringing their 5-year-long legal saga to a close. And then that James K. 𝕯𝖚𝖚𝖘 posted some of the documentation there. And here's just another little synopsis. The SEC's long-running case against Ripple is officially over. So, I mean, I just read this, minutes before I started this video, and so it's still sinking into me, like if it's official or not. But like these articles are sounding pretty official, that this lawsuit, has nowhere left to go, no more appeals, because it has just been such a long process. I even just remember posting on my story last week, this is never ending, or this week actually, some kind of development happened. I was like, it's never ending, but apparently it's over now. So that's amazing. And this is saying the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission first sued Ripple in 2020, blah, 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 blah. After the two parties informed the Second Circuit Court of Appeals that they were voluntarily dismissing their respective appeals of a 2023 ruling in the case. The SEC and Ripple will each bear their own costs, the filing said on Thursday. The joint stipulation ends the legal battle between the SEC and Ripple, which began in 2020. Blah, blah, blah. So it's over. Congratulations to everyone. Everyone who held since 2020. I bought in 2021 and was just waiting like any day this case could end. It's officially over. And so, XRP is cleared to launch. If you think of this as like a rocket on the launch pad, it's like the weather is clear, the space debris is clear, the satellites are clear. We are clear to launch to 589 whenever we're ready. And I think a big part of this will be the institutional adoptions. When we also actually just had the news is coming in so hot and fast today that Trump put out an executive order today saying that people can now have crypto and XRP in their 401ks. And so that's just another confidence builder in the utility and the long-term security of crypto. And so there's so many signs. The big one, though, will be institutional adoption. When I've even read things this week about banks are starting to use it. And as more and more institutions start using XRP for international monetary transfers, we could see that driving up the price, which that will then encourage more retail investors as well. And so it's looking very good for XRP. And, as we have predicted in the past, that the other ISO coins like XLM and, the sub tokens of XRP and XLM seem to be moving upward in sync with XRP. And so we've even seen Stronghold, which I talked about recently, making leaps upward as well. So all looking very good. And that concludes the good news for this video, which I would say the good news definitely far outweighs the bad news. But before we get to the bad news, let's throw in a little promo for DSMP, which is now on dsmp.io is the domain. You can still get to it from deepstatemappingproject.com, but it's so much easier to just type those 6 beautiful letters, dsmp.io, to get all the posters you see behind me, t-shirts, crystals, health and body products, and much more. In this video, announcing that we have completed the new seed oil map, which is now available in multiple formats. And I'm going to do a quick screen share here to show you. This artwork was designed as a smaller poster. So the poster is 18 by 24. You see it here in various renderings. These are the auto thumbnails. I'm not crazy about them. But if you want, I know the small print's going to be popular, and we are going to include the small print eventually in our healing packet, or the ultimate health packet, rather. So this is going to be the small, like the handheld print version with the front and the back. A little more information on the back here. Now, I'm going to do a separate video probably walking through this diagram. It's a more simple one. It's not as complex as several of my other diagrams. But essentially, the premise here, is that seed oils are one of the main contributors to the obesity epidemic, I would say, along with soda, Coke, even diet sodas, and a couple other main culprits. But seed oils have been the secret ingredient that, you know, is in virtually all processed foods, that is really one of the main culprits for the obesity epidemic. And so we have this as t-shirts as well. This is one of the few times that I've actually released everything all at once, like the posters, the prints, and the t-shirts. And I've already actually seen samples of this. I could be wearing it in this video, but it's an intense one. And so we got the t-shirts available. We got the tank top, which, you know, if you into the sleeveless thing, we got tank top. Sorry, my internet's going really slow today. I even had to cancel a Zoom call earlier because my internet was so slow. We're having someone come out tomorrow to look at it. But we got the tank top, and we even got the athletic shorts, which I'm actually wearing right now as I'm recording this video. The athletic shorts are a lot of fun. It took a more of an abstract approach to the athletic shorts. It's really bits and pieces of the diagram and the reverse of the diagram all chopped up all over the body. There's the back is actually the front on the shorts, but it's just kind of the vibe, you know, it's the neon yellow and black vibes. So check all that out on DSMP.io. The new seed oil map, I'm hoping to do a walkthrough of that either this week or next week, but it's pretty straightforward to just know to recognize these seed oils, understanding what makes them bad, and that you know, they may contain traces of hexane, which is a petrochemical that you don't want to be consuming. And like I said, that will be eventually included in our Ultimate Health packet once we get those prints in. And our best-selling product still is the Intel packet, where you get a smorgasbord of our most important diagrams. Now, the seed oil map probably won't be included in the Intel packet since it's more related to health and it's a little more esoteric. But the Intel packet contains most of the ones you see behind me and more. So DSMP.io, check it out. Check out all the different crystals. We still have a lot of what we brought from Tucson back in February. Big crystals like the one you see here. And yeah, check out all the different categories. And we're still looking to relaunch the website with a redesign any day now. I'm waiting for my marketing team to wrap up all the final updates, and then you'll see a whole new experience on DSMP.io. And now on to what I'm calling the bad news. And now it's not necessarily bad news, but it's like surface level bad news that if you're not trusting the plan and you're not understanding the long-term goal here, it could look like bad news. And the first piece of bad news is that Congress goes to Israel. That House Speaker Mike Johnson led a Republican delegation to Israel during the August 2025 congressional recess. The group included representatives from Texas and New York, and the trip was organized by the U.S. Israel Educational Association, and they met with Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials. And so, you know, at this point in history, at this stage in the Gaza genocide, you know, associating with Israel in this way is very much looked down upon by virtually everyone, other than like the hardcore Fox News watchers that watch commercials about these poor Israelis every 10 minutes or so. And so it's not looking good, like for Mike Johnson to be doing this at this time, especially with just this week, Benjamin Netanyahu declaring that Israel will occupy the whole of Gaza, and even stories from previous weeks recently talking about, he may end up wanting to occupy all of West Bank as well. So essentially saying that all of what was Palestine, he would like to be Israel. And it would seem from the reports we're seeing that Israel's actions seem to be in line with this. They're perpetually taking more territory, claiming more territory, taking in bulldozers and demolition equipment into the West Bank, as well as Gaza, doing controlled demolitions on areas of Gaza that are already unoccupied. So, what happened to Trump's plan back from March about like the USA is going to take over Gaza? I'm not sure, but Benjamin Netanyahu is wanting to take all of Palestine. And for Mike Johnson and these Republicans to be showing up there and saying that, we're going to stand with Israel forever, no matter what, is just pretty embarrassing. So let's watch this one clip of him and, try to just close our eyes or try to forget that this happened. But this could be part of the long-term strategy of keeping the enemy close, or keeping the friends close and the enemies closer. But either way, it's a little bit humiliating for everyone that supported Republicans and Trump and Mike Johnson. And, a good portion of the Republican base has now turned against Trump over this issue of Israel. And it's unfortunate to see, but hopefully we'll bring them back in the end when we do see justice for Israel. But let's watch this clip first.
Mike Johnson, the 56th Speaker of the House of Representatives in America. We're here with a delegation of members of the House. We're so grateful to be in Israel, particularly on this day, recognizing the destruction of the two temples and 2 times in history. But it is such a moving time for us to be here at the Wailing Wall. We've offered our prayers, we put our notes into the wall as just traditional, and we're so moved by the hospitality of the people and the great love of Israel. Our prayer is that America will always stand with Israel, and that we will we pray for the preservation and the peace of Jerusalem. That's what Scripture tells us to do. It's a matter of faith for us and a commitment that we have. God bless you.
All right. Well, I'm sorry that you had to watch that. I'm sorry that this has had to happen. And I would not be caught dead doing that. It's like they just went into you see what Commie Gibberish of the Day said, that they just went into recess early so that they would not have to vote on something related to Epstein disclosure. And what does he do? He flees to Israel first thing, goes to the Wailing Wall. And this video is so strange. You see that random piece of paper like flying across that behind him. I'm not sure what that was, if someone was trying to put their prayer in the Wailing Wall and just literally threw it at him or what. But it's very strange. It seems somewhat forced. It seems somewhat out of touch with reality when, most of the world is considering Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal and a psychopath and someone who has conducted genocide, and to just be, speaking like this, completely oblivious of the constant stream of death coming from Gaza, whether it's real or fake. It's not anything you want to be in support of. And so a couple other details about this little trip to Gaza, that Mike Johnson visited the West Bank, including Ariel, which is a university, on Monday, in the first ever official visit by U.S. House Speaker to the area. Judea and Samaria are the front lines of the state of Israel and must remain an integral part of it, Johnson said during his visit. Even if the world thinks otherwise, we stand with you, he added. So being very firm with his support for Israel and acting like he represents our country, which I think a fairly small minority of the country feels this way about Israel. We've even heard statements from Trump saying recently that MAGA is turning on Israel. So he knows, I'm sure Mike Johnson knows as well. So I'm not sure what the point of this is, other than to get a reaction like what I'm giving right now, to start this dialogue even more, of saying, there's probably white hats monitoring the level of hatred towards Israel, or, support rather, let's call it. We don't want to be consumed by hate necessarily, but we definitely don't want to be supporting a genocidal state anymore. And Johnson was originally slated to address Israel's parliament, the Knesset plenum. He had originally planned this visit to Israel on June 22nd, but he announced on June 16th that he would be postponing the trip due to the outbreak of the Israel-Iran war. Now, we call that the outbreak of the Israel-Iran war. What that was Israel attacked Iran and Iran retaliated. And so let's just keep that in mind. So yeah, this is humiliating. Maybe it's a humiliation ritual of some kind. Maybe they're trying to get more podcasts to talk about why and how Israel is so bad. But it's like, this has been going on for so long now. What are we coming up to, like the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th massacre, which was, primarily Israeli helicopters shooting their own people. And well, I won't say primarily, both sides were at fault, but ultimately, this state has got to go. Israel has got to go the same direction as the Democrat Party, which is into the void. Now, we have some other very interesting stories that big balls. So big balls, and everyone's been posting about this. Elon's posted about this, and wokeness, Trump, everyone yesterday shared this image of big balls shirtless and bloody. Doge staffer Ed Korestein, known as Big Balls, came to help a lady in DC and got attacked by 8 teens. So they're saying 8 teens were attacking a woman, and Big Balls stepped in to save her and saved her from this mob, and got a concussion himself. And I mean, if this is what happened, like, kudos to him. He's like the white savior. Good job. But just something about this seems a little bit artificial to me. The fact that his name is Big Balls and he like saved a woman from being attacked, and this is now national news, and there's a picture of him like shirtless. It's just all seems a little false flaggy. And I'm not crazy about the white hats doing their own false flags. I'm not sure what the ultimate goal of this is. It seems like they're trying to like start a race war or something. Or the goal of this could definitely be to federalize DC, to prove that the crime and the lawlessness is out of control. And so therefore Trump needs full control of the city, which I support that, without having false flags. But I feel like these if this is a false flag, I'm not just going to go along with it. I'm not going to say like, oh, like, we have such a big problem. I mean, I know it is a problem, and I know we don't always get it on video, and I know we don't always get, a shirtless, young blonde boy to be like the poster child for it. But it's the deep state strategies are becoming a little bit too obvious that the white hats are using, I would say. And I have even started questioning what happened in Cincinnati last week, which was quite similar to this. Obviously, a white person, being attacked by a black mob. And we had a big statement about Trump about this, essentially saying that I'm not going to read this whole thing. You guys can read this if you want. Take the time to read it. It's not that long. But, he's essentially using this attack as a pretext to federalize DC. And we have already heard this type of rhetoric from Trump earlier this year. And I think they might just be, creating some new events in order to drum up the public support for this type of a takeover. As you may know, DC is one of the most blue, liberal, Democrat cities in all the country. And so, certainly the locals would not vote for like a Republican ever. But being as it is, the capital, and that this country voted in a Republican president, you would think that it would make sense that Republicans should be in control of the actual city as well as the country. And so, yeah, I'm not loving like these tactics that I see the white hats using here of, potentially creating these like racially charged false flags in order to, get this agenda done. And in a way, it seems like they're in a way trying to start a race war, very similar to how they did in 2020. And, I'm not sure if necessarily the George Floyd riots, which was a lot of BLM, was necessarily white hat orchestrated or not. But, we do kind of think at this point, in this Q movement, that the white hats are somewhat controlling both sides, at least in the public narrative, maybe minus a few like rogue cells or, rogue elements of the deep state operating on a high level. But, things like Soros, Black Lives Matter, it's just gotten so confusing. It's hard to know which side is good, which side is bad, and the good guys are using the bad guys' strategies. But I do believe that DC should be federalized, but I'm not sure how far the white hats are going to go with trying to stir up a race war and what the point of that would be. And, if the white hats implemented this continuity of government operation in 2020, essentially with the national emergency declared over COVID, then, we would have already been in that national emergency during all those George Floyd protests during 2020. And so is like the White House responsible for all of that? Or was that still like a genuine Soros operation? I'm not sure when control was handed over. But all I'm saying is, this with big balls, it kind of stands out to me as most likely like artificial, like it's staged. Like, and if it's not, I'm sorry, that's always the problem with calling anything a false flag, is that you say something is a false flag and then it's like, oh, you're being insensitive to the victims. I'm being insensitive to the hero, big balls. Well, I just go with my gut feeling on these things. So ultimately, I support the goal here of federalizing DC. So I want to finish up this news and this bad news essentially with the Cincinnati return of the woman who was attacked in Cincinnati. So we all watched it, or I didn't put it in my video, but we saw the video from Cincinnati 2 weekends ago when this group of white people was attacked by a mob of black people during Jazzfest. I almost called it Blackfest. During Jazzfest, and this woman was on video, punched straight in the face and fell backwards and, smacked her head on the pavement, full speed, falling. And so I had not even heard of this show, Benny Johnson, before. Apparently he has 5.5 million subscribers, and he had done a fundraiser for this woman and raised $500,000. Her version of the story was that, they went out to this birthday party downtown, and while they were on the street waiting for an Uber, they got jumped. I wish she would go into like a little more detail about that. But for some reason, okay, so I saw this interview with her on Benny Johnson, and like immediately when she opened her mouth and started talking, I just got the sense that something might not be quite fully organic here. So, similar to the big ball story, like as soon as she starts doing these interviews and talking, I was like, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not saying I'm 100% either way. Of course, if she really is a victim here, I'm completely sympathetic. But, as a conspiracy theorist, like when something starts making this much news, like I question whether it has been orchestrated or not. And now just today, August 7th, as I was, preparing the pictures for this video, I noticed FoxNews.com now has this woman as the #1 story, the #1 feature on Fox News. And she has her own interview with Fox News. It's very similar to the interview with Benny Johnson. But, it's getting a lot of publicity now. It went from, being completely ignored by all the media outlets, including Fox, but especially all the liberal media outlets and the Democrat media outlets, to now 2 weeks later being the #1 story. And I'm just going back and remembering my version of the events that night. And this may be a stretch now, but I'm gonna put this theory out there that I don't know if you guys recall when I was giving my version of these events, that I drove through essentially 1 block away from this area about an hour before this happened, and I noticed these tour buses that were literally parked blocking 3rd Street, which is one of the main, streets of traffic around the stadium area. There was these 2 big tour buses like just parked on the street, blocking multiple lanes. And I was like, why are those buses parked there? Like they really shouldn't be there. And so now I'm wondering, like, did those buses like release like a huge crew of like crisis actors to like stage this event? I don't know. I mean, it could definitely be buses that came from other cities to bring people to and from Jazzfest. But I'm starting to suspect that something about this event in Cincinnati may have even been inorganic. But that's just a suspicion. I'm saying, like, let's keep looking into this. Let's not let the media like turn us into like KKK as white people if we're watching this and you're white. Because there was also stories that someone had been throwing like KKK meetup flyers like in black neighborhoods in Cincinnati like last weekend. And so again, what is the goal here? Are they trying to start a race war? Or are they trying to just bring National Guard or like bring Marines into like more cities like they did in LA, or how they're trying to do in DC? Could this be gearing up towards like the 14 to 17 cities, like going into martial law that we've expected for a long time? Perhaps. But, I think that the goal of this ultimately might be good, or probably is good, because it will be good to clean up these cities. It's good to not get rid of, but to put the homeless people, somewhere safe where everyone's going to be safe, including them and, citizens as well. And, it'll be good to bring attention to the problems in our legal system, problems with the mayor, problems with the cops, problems with the judges that are not properly prosecuting violent criminals. And another revelation I've kind of had since I did my video about Cincinnati last week is that even the Cincinnati police chief said in a press conference last Friday that she partially puts blame on these judges who are releasing a lot of these criminals who have, multiple offenses. They're clearly violent, troubled people, and they keep getting released on small amounts of bail and committing more crimes, worse and worse crimes, as they keep getting released more and more times. And there's this, the sentiment in the community that there will be no repercussions for these crimes. And even Trump sort of echoes some of this in his statement here, saying that at the same time, knowing that they will almost be immediately released, they are not afraid of law enforcement because they know nothing ever happens to them, but it's going to happen now. The law in DC must be changed to prosecute these minors as adults and lock them up for a long time. So I'm fairly certain if Trump's saying that he knows that this is a problem in many, many other cities, that, criminals are not being properly punished for their crimes, and that, the sentiment in the demographics that commit these crimes is that they have no fear of the police, especially since the George Floyd protests. And that really needs to change. It needs to be announced that there will be appropriate punishment for crime. And I would even say, like, let's bring back some form of like a public like display, not necessarily public execution. Like that's pretty barbaric, but like there needs to be, like in China, for example, if someone commits a crime, they put their face on all these different LED screens and like they humiliate them, and it's a whole like public humiliation. This not quite as barbaric as like, a GIMP cage like at the courthouse or something, but it's like a modern form of like a public humiliation that comes with these crimes to make it known generally that these crimes will not be tolerated and that like law and order has been restored. And so again, I'm not, if these events with big balls and this Holly character are somehow being engineered to be some kind of a, media spectacle to get to this ultimate end. I support the ultimate end, but I don't like being propagandized. I don't like false flags being perpetuated by the white hats. And so we'll just have to see how all that pans out. But like I said, I have been kind of led down a thread of research into these judges, looking into who are the judges locally here in Cincinnati, and even investigating who put these judges in there, who is responsible for which judges get on the ballot. Because obviously, even when we have a ballot, we have a list of like 3 or 4 names that doesn't say their political affiliation. Unless you really go out of your way to do a lot of research, like you have really no idea which judge to even vote for. And even if they are not corrupt being voted in, I think I'd say there's a pretty good chance with the way the deep state operates of them being corrupted after they're already voted in. And so there needs to be major changes to the whole judicial system in this country. And I think that, as voters and as citizens, we need to be paying more attention to who is on the ballot, this whole process. I've been investigating, who is the judge's supervisor, who is the boss, and none of these questions are really easy to answer. And so this is something that is a big issue across the country. As we've heard, these Soros prosecutors are part of the problem, or Soros DAs, district attorneys, and the judges have become a big problem as well, which Trump has already dealt with some of those judges in just trying to deport the illegal immigrants, which he's had victories at the Supreme Court on that front. But we need to address nationwide the problem of judges not taking these what begins as petty criminals and, ultimately progresses into, murderers just because someone's black, that they are getting off like super easy on all these crimes that would otherwise be serious crimes. And, when we say that shoplifting is legal, like in California, and then that becomes normalized, it just becomes normalizing worse and worse crimes eventually until we start seeing things like what we see here, whether it's real or not, with Holly and Big Balls, that these people are just becoming lawless, let's say. They're becoming desensitized to crime, unafraid of the police, unafraid of the law, entitled and amped up. And just social media is another big problem here that they've been talking about in the Holly case a lot, that, it's become these people's culture to film crime and, use it to go viral. And that all needs to change. So, just to keep in mind that whatever you see on the news, it's not necessarily the opposite, but it definitely deserves to be questioned, because we know in the past, like, how tricky they have been. And as conspiracy theorists, or truthers, I prefer the term, we know crisis actors are real. We know crisis actors can be hired in large numbers, not necessarily just individuals, or they can be individuals, very talented actresses or actors that can cry, that can pretend to be someone they're not. Something about Holly's voice when she talked, it sounded very familiar to me. Now, it may just be like that type of a woman or that type of a liberal, I don't know, but something seemed familiar to me that said maybe something's inorganic here, with all due respect to her if she actually was a victim. So just always keep a keen eye and question everything. And don't be afraid to be called insensitive because you're trying to get to the truth, because truth is ultimately what matters. And that's it for this week. That's the news. More good news than bad news. XRP SEC ended. Hopefully next week we'll be back. Well, we will be back with the Cranker team, and hopefully we'll be discussing a new all-time high of XRP. And so buy in if you're not in already. And don't forget to check out DSMP.io. On the homepage there, subscribe to our newsletter to be informed of all our new video drops, artwork launches, expos, sales, and more. Like and subscribe on this video, and stay tuned for the seed oil map walkthrough coming soon. Get the seed oil map poster, 18 by 24, or a small print, or the t-shirt, or the shorts. And with that, we'll see you guys on the next video. New Templars.
He could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the future of finance.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people.
Now reflects the
What's storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out. You'll find out.
Just now we saw a black triangular craft fly just right through those two mountains.
And how far we're willing to go to fight to keep it this way.